You know, just get it started.
All right, everybody,
All right,
here
hey,
he is.
How are you doing?
Speaker Paul
What's
Ryan.
on, man? Hey, welcome. Nice to have
see
you.
you.
Welcome.
How's it going?
Everybody's from Wisconsin, right?
There are a lot of
Not
Wisconsin
really.
people
Yeah,
here.
good.
No, there are.
Good.
This is about as friendly an audience as you're going to get.
Let's see. No, I'm just kidding. Hey guys, how you doing? Good. I've never been in this building before.
Isn't it nice? The AT&T Forum.
New building.
Yes,
Pretty cool.
beautiful.
Huh.
So
What
welcome.
do you want to talk about?
There's hardly anything to talk about.
Not much, really.
No.
Yeah.
We'll try to find something. So does it ever occur to you, you wonder, like, what the heck did you get yourself into?
No, I knew about it. That's why I said no 4 times. I'm getting the job. So, no, I've been around for a while now, and I've watched this job from afar. I feel honored to have it, and we've got such an incredible opportunity in front of us, and we are going through the inevitable growing pains that we must go through to convert from being a 10-year opposition party to being a governing party within the span of 4 months. And so, did I ever think it would go perfectly? No, of course not. 2/3 of our members have never served with a Republican president before. It's new. Coming to agreement, negotiating, compromising, passing a bill, saying yes, that's new for a lot of people. So obviously it takes us time, especially when we're taking on something as huge and massive as healthcare. On that bill, we're basically 90% of the way there. But to pass a bill, we got to be 95% of the way there. So,
Geez, I always think that when you go to the floor, you better be 100% of the way there.
Well, sometimes you go to the floor when you're at 90, hoping you'll get to 95. But that's why I pulled the bill, because I want us to keep talking. We're having very productive conversations. We're all at the concept stage right now, but productive conversations. And it's all about how do we get there and how do we keep working on premiums, because that's the big concern. The Obamacare premium spike that we've seen in anything close to what we're expecting if the law continues as is.
Okay, but you're kind of up against a deadline here, aren't you?
Not really.
You're going on recess at the end of the week, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean we can keep working this for weeks now. We don't have some kind of artificial deadline in front of us. We had an ideal calendar in front of us, which was to have this process through the system in April. But it was a calendar that I laid out for 2017 that clearly has room to breathe, and we're in the breathing room right now. But we've got time to figure this out.
So you said growing pains, but I think a lot of people I talk to, and a lot of Republicans are, I would say, alarmed at what's going on. You say it's growing pains, but they're thinking, wow, if we don't do this, other things won't happen, and you only got a year to make it happen, and then wow.
Yeah, I don't see that one must get done for the other to happen. That's not the case, but it clearly makes it easier. It clearly helps us rack up successes, and this is one of the most prominent promises we made as a party. So that's why we really aren't going to take one setback and just call it a day. We're going to keep going at it, keep trying, keep talking until we get it right. And that's going to take us some time, and we're not going to put some artificial deadline, especially when we don't have to get it right. But just having said that, we've got a lot of ideas and a lot of plans, things we ran on. All those efforts are still underway. All those committees and those members are still doing their work, whether it's the military or the tax reform or all of the other things that we're talking about, all the regulatory stuff. That's all occurring simultaneously. What is being focused on, understandably so, is what's in front of us at this moment.
Right.
And that's healthcare right now. And the Senate, it's a judge, Gorsuch, who...
At least you don't have to do that.
Yeah, no, but I think, right. But I hope we have good news by the end of the week on that he'll be confirmed. But we're all working on all these other things at the same time.
So are you really, you're truly optimistic there's going to be a health care deal that's going to pass the
Well,
House?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there's a health care deal, but I don't want to put any specific odds on it or an artificial timeline, because what's happening is what needs to happen, which is members need to start talking with each other about why they think the way they think, so that they can get a better understanding of each other's concerns. That's how you bridge gaps. We were very close, but not close enough. And so we've got to get a little closer, and that means members need to talk to each other and understand each other's concerns to find where the common ground is.
Okay, so I think the Pence shuttle diplomacy seems to be an interesting operation.
Yeah, we've been encouraging that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so were you in this meeting last night?
No, but I won't get into who's in what meeting and all of that. Only to say that we've been encouraging people to talk to each other, and we want members from the House, the Senate, and the White House to understand each other's perspectives, so that everybody understands each other's perspectives, person to person, instead of through third parties. And that's the kind of conversations and dynamic I was hoping to achieve as recently as last week. That didn't occur last week, but it's occurring this week, and so that to me is a positive development.
So why is Pence the pivot point and not you?
Well, there's no one pivot point, but we want the administration to understand just what people think, so that they have a better view into our caucus and our conference and what people think. So we want the administration to hear directly from members.
Okay, so I guess the critics have said this was an education, the failure of the health care bill, or I should say the first non-vote, so was an education for the White House.
Nothing's easy. This is about 18% of our economy. Very strong opinions run around the gamut on this. We need about 95% of our conference to vote for a bill to pass a bill. We had about 90% of our conference. I call it keeping the frogs in the wheelbarrow. We had 90% of the frogs there, but not 95%. And we had to do things that bring votes and don't cost votes. And that's the sweet spot that we're still looking for. And that's what I want everybody to talk to each other. I want to encourage these kinds of conversations so that people can kind of get a better sense where that sweet spot is. And you can't develop that if you don't directly hear from people, members, and their concerns. And that's why I've been encouraging these conversations. When leadership gets involved in sort of Bigfoots and runs a meeting, those kinds of conversations don't occur as well. I want members freely expressing themselves so that people understand what it is that they think and what their concerns are.
Okay, so you haven't yet mentioned the phrase Freedom Caucus. So, I mean, to many people, it seems like the tail's wagging the dog here. So they're getting a lot of attention, and there's all kinds of members of your caucus who, aren't.
Well,
so is that the right way to run a Navy?
This is not a top-down, heavy-handed system. I don't believe in this. One of the reasons I think my colleagues asked me to be in this job is that I wasn't going to be an autocrat. I was going to run a bottom-up, inclusive, participatory system, and that is a little less predictable, and it can come across as a little more organic. That's what we want. So I don't want a system where it's top-down and leadership command and controlled. I want a system where members feel that they have an ability to affect policy, express their opinions, and be heard. And that is how you end up getting to a better, stronger, lasting consensus. We're going through that process now. The fact of the matter is because we have to use reconciliation, the Senate budget rules makes it more time sensitive, but also more frustrating for our members, because in the House we're a majoritarian system. We can usually pass what we want to pass, put everything in a bill we want to put it in a bill, and enjoy doing that. But because it's reconciliation, we have so many limitations. That's just really frustrating for our members. So we can't put what we think is the best possible policy in a piece of legislation, because we know if we do that, it's called fatal, it's not reconcilable, it's automatically filibustered in the Senate, and they won't even take it up. And so it's really sort of that frustration with the rules that we have to live by that is the source of this. And so getting members to sort of understand those parameters, those limitations, and then working with each other to find consensus within those is what we're trying to achieve. And what I want is an organic bottom-up process where members talk things through, get in rooms, hear each other's perspectives. And you can't do that if leadership is just ramming and being autocratic. That's what I don't want to do, because I don't think that's the way the system should work.
Okay, so you really are setting a tone for tax reform in the future, for infrastructure, for other big things. So it would seem that they are linked, because you're setting up a process.
Setting up a process where members
This
talk
is what I
about these
mean.
things,
So
yeah.
so this has to be successful for the other things to happen.
No, it's actually technically not the
That's
case.
not technically true. I'm just saying, though.
Yeah, I think
under your
it clearly
scenario,
helps us. With
Yeah.
tax reform, it's $1 trillion on a baseline difference.
Yeah.
If we aren't going to get Obamacare, let's just say we pass a bill in the House and the Senate can't pass it or something like that, then those Obamacare taxes we'll have to set aside and leave over there with Obamacare, and then go work on reforming the rest of the tax code. Tax reform, from a Republican standpoint, is easier than health care, because reconciling tax reform, you can put everything you want in tax reform in a reconciliation bill. You don't have to leave things outside of it. Healthcare, that's not true. Healthcare, a lot of the things you want to do, medical liability reform, interstate shopping, all the regulatory relief, you can't put in a reconciliation bill. So it's a very imperfect, incomplete process. That's a frustrating process. But tax reform, all of that can go in a reconciliation process. So we don't have the real frustrations members are experiencing with reconciliation like they have with healthcare. We don't have that problem with tax reform. Plus, our DNA as Republicans are wired far more similarly with each other on tax issues than they are, say, on healthcare issues.
Why did you do that one first then?
You can't do it first because the baseline issues also, we will need more time to do tax reform. We need to have a longer time to do tax reform.
I need more time to do my taxes.
Well, you're right. So that's part of the problem. Yeah. So it's Jeff Meyer's fault. No, healthcare is something with this reconciliation has a shelf life that doesn't last all year long, and we were actually closer in agreement on healthcare than we were on tax reform. The House has a plan, but the Senate doesn't quite have one yet. They're working on one. The White House hasn't nailed it down. So even the three entities aren't on the same page yet on tax reform. The House, the White House, and the Senate wrote this healthcare bill together, starting in November through January. This was a joint operation by the three already. We don't yet have that in tax reform, so we couldn't go with tax reform first.
So at the end of the month, it's not going to be much of a recess for you guys. So if you're going to be negotiating healthcare, and then at the end of the month you might run up against government shutdown talk. I mean, that doesn't seem like a great recess period. Well,
recess period, we're going to keep working on these issues. We're going to keep working on government funding. The appropriators are doing their jobs. They're negotiating their bills, which is what they're supposed to do. They've been working on that all along. We already got the defense bill done out of the House, and it's just the other 11 bills. On healthcare, we're having very productive conversations. I just don't know when we're going to get a resolution out of those conversations, but at least we're now narrowing down over the areas of disagreement to see if there's common ground. That we have time to figure that out, and we're just going to take the time it needs to do that.
Okay, well, is healthcare linked to government shutdown?
No.
Okay, do you think there would be a government shutdown?
I don't believe so, because I think we should get what we need to do to advance the president's priorities and keep government going. I don't think people want to see the Pentagon get another continuing resolution, which really hurts our warfighters in the Pentagon. I believe that there's a goal to get the president's priorities advanced. And the other thing that typically was the problem we had with government shutdowns in the past was it was opposition party fighting the other party in the White House. We don't have to go get Obama riders from the Obama administration. We have the Trump administration that's not doing the kinds of things that the Obama administration did. So that takes a lot of pressure off the problem. We're not worried about the Trump administration on a lot of different regulatory issues like we were worried with the Obama administration. So the pressure for those riders that we had with Obama is evaporated with respect to Trump.
So things will be running smoothly soon.
Well, this is the federal government, so I think that's kind of oversimplifying the situation.
But I mean, look, I think hasn't it been,
we will always have negotiations.
Hasn't it been more chaotic than you ever imagined? I mean, come on.
It is more chaotic, but I think that's just the function of 21st century internet, cable news, polarization of America, all of that stuff. I call that the white noise of the day. That is just how politics and government seem to work these days in this 21st century instant news, internet era we're in. On appropriations, the obvious challenge is those are 60-vote bills in the Senate. So those are bills that you can't, say, reconcile. They take 60 votes, and that's where the challenge comes at the end of the day. It's really not a House challenge as much as it is a Senate challenge.
Okay, so to some serious foreign policy stuff, what should be done about Syria?
How much time do you have?
I mean, we've been talking about Syria, the civil war, for how long? And now you have a cataclysmic event that's going to capture the world's attention. And
he just gassed his people.
This is my point.
So you have a situation where I think the Obama administration made a colossal failure of foreign policy. It brought the Russians into play. It brought the Iranians in. It brought a whole catastrophe, a human refugee catastrophe. And so here is where we are. We've got a fight for Raqqa that's beginning. We've had the problems we've had in Aleppo. We've got Mosul. That campaign is underway right now. So you had the Trump administration giving the military more of the tools and the resources that they need to get after ISIS, and that's occurring, and that's constructive and helpful. You have the Assad regime going, I'd say, more on offense, and obviously with gas, going after their own people. The whole thing is a mess. I don't want to get ahead of what our military is going to be doing or what the president is going to be doing, but he was dealt a terrible hand. I think he's playing the hand as best as he possibly can. I think also some of this deals with the Turks, their election coming up, and how they handle the situation vis-a-vis the Kurds. So I think there are a few more things that are coming that will determine how well this goes at the end of the day. But what matters, I think, for our national security immediately is what are we doing about ISIS? And that's something that we're focused on, and I think that's something we're making progress on.
Do you think the Trump administration gave Assad a green light the other day?
No, I don't think you should make a causal relationship between the comments that Nikki Haley and Rex Tillerson made and Assad. There is no justification for a genocidal dictator gassing his own people. The responsibility rests with the man who did that and no one else.
Okay. Russia obviously has a big role in the Middle East. They've grown their role in the Middle East, and now they're aligned with Assad. And meantime, we have all the investigations going on here. That seems to be a mess.
Yeah. Again, the president got dealt a terrible hand because I think the Obama administration had awful foreign policy. They appeased Russia early on. They gave away missile defense. Remember that hot mic moment, where we had, I think you can see an appeasement policy initiated with Russia, and then relations grew frosty with Russia. And we now see that Russia is trying to extend its reach. It's poking and prodding NATO. We know what it did in Ukraine. We know what it's done in Georgia. And now they've deeply involved themselves in Syria. The question is, can we have a Russian policy that stands up to Russia and that helps our allies stand up to Russia? That, to me, is where we have to go from here. The only area where I could see a possible momentary interest alignment with Russia is possibly in Syria, which is to help get the foreign fighters out, including the Iranians, and get ISIS out. That is where I think we could see a common mutual interest. The rest of the question is making sure that NATO is strengthened, that there's zero question whatsoever about our commitment to NATO and the protection of NATO. And then what we all now know, and we're finding out much more, we have a long investigation on this, is just what is it that Russia does to try and undermine democracies, like what they try to do in our elections. They're doing this all over Europe right now. And we have unique capabilities that no one else has through our intelligence community to try and determine and uncover what their methods are and their tactics are and what it is they're doing. And we need to assist our allies in helping them prevent Russia from tainting their democracies.
Oh, they were trying it out there before they tried it out on.
They've been doing it all over the world.
Right.
So but we have, I think, a unique responsibility as a world superpower as to advance our principles and our values to help our like-minded democracies to guard against this Russian aggression into their democratic systems.
Okay, I'm going to go out to the audience soon, but while I'm walking out there, this is the question is, on the Russian investigations by the House committee and the Senate committee, is it smoke or is there fire?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. This investigation's just underway. It's got a ways to go. I met with the committee yesterday. Just follow the facts and go wherever they take you. We've got a lot of work to do on that, and that's why it's in question. When you're beginning an investigation, the last thing you should do is conclude what it's going to discover. We don't know.
How is your House committee doing?
I think they're back on track. I think the House committee is back on track. I think they've got. I think they tentatively gotten a witness list agreed to. We've said just go find out where all of this goes and look at everything that we have. And so I think the committee is well on its way. I think the Senate's well on its way. This is what Congress is supposed to do, by the way. Congress is supposed to investigate things like this. And that's why we have to go through, take our time, get it right, and uncover whatever there is to be uncovered, and then figure out what needs to be done to learn from mistakes that were made. especially with respect to how Russia tried to meddle within our election system. They didn't get away with it, but how do we make sure that that can't happen again?
Okay, here's a question.
Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for being here today. I'm Kathy Kuhn with the Medical College of Wisconsin.
Oh, hey, Kathy, how you doing?
I'm great, thanks. And
Yeah.
first of all, we really appreciate everything you've done on NIH funding, on passing the CARES, 21st Century CARES. So that leads into my question.
Appropriations.
Yes. Where are you? Obviously, the entire research community is very concerned about the President Trump proposed cuts for both 17 and 18 to the NIH. It would be a huge, devastating hit, you know. I mean, your office is great on this issue working with us, but wondering, where are you on the cuts and where do you see the House coming out?
Well, I don't try to get into, making my opinion on specific provisions. All I would say is perhaps the most popular domestic funding we have among Republicans is NIH. It's one of the reasons we got consensus on the Cures bill in the first place. The Cures bill was a way of finding savings to hit these benchmarks on cures, and a lot of that's NIH. So the same Republicans who drafted and passed that bill are the same Republicans who are now drafting appropriations and the rest. Tom Cole and Roy Bunt are two people I can point to who are in charge of that area. What the administration had to do, because they're in their first year, is give us a partial budget. They call it a skinny budget. They don't have the resources and the time to give us a full, complete budget. No administration does when they're in their first year. So I think you've just seen a piece of what they're trying to achieve. What we have long believed is we have to get savings from the mandatory side of the spending ledger, which is where the debt crisis comes from, which is where the spending is uncapped and non-controlled. It's on autopilot, in order to make fiscal space for priorities in discretionary spending. I also do think, though, that there are areas in domestic discretionary spending that we can get savings from to honor other priorities. And I think among the high priorities is basic health research, NIH, things like that. So what will happen is what always happens. President sends a budget to Congress, then Congress begins working on their budget and passes their appropriation bills. As a person who's been involved in budgets ever since I've been here, I really think the answer to these problems of hitting our fiscal targets, getting the deficit and debt under control, is to get more savings from mandatory spending, because that's the autopilot, unreformed side of our budget. And it's getting to be about 2/3 of our budget. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting to be that much. We have caps on discretionary spending. We have real serious problems with our military. We've got to get savings from the mandatory side of the ledger to pay for these things.
Okay, here's a question.
Speaker Ryan, Sam Wilson with AARP Wisconsin. Thank you for being here with us. I think Jeff's already put you through the ringer on the healthcare issues, but there's
That wasn't the ringer.
that wasn't the ringer. There's one issue related to that, though, that we'd like to raise, and that is President Trump indicated some interest in doing something about the cost of prescription drugs, and that was something that he talked a lot about on the campaign trail. It's something obviously AARP members are really concerned about and have seen no downward pressure on that. Is there something that you see potentially happening in the House that could move through that would address that
Yeah,
issue?
Commerce Committee's working on this issue. That's their jurisdiction. So Greg Walden and his committee is looking into the price of drugs. As you may have heard with our healthcare efforts, we've seen this in 3 phases. First is the bill we're still working on negotiating, which is phase 1, which is not Medicare, but it's Medicaid and Obamacare. Phase 2 are the regulatory relief we think will bring down prices, bring more state competition through HHS. Phase 3 are passing bills that you cannot put in a budget, that need 60 votes. This is in the phase 3 category. So prescription drugs, the S-chip authorization, PDUFA, which is a drug issue, and then all these other issues that we want to look at, association health plans, stop-loss coverage, interstate shopping, medical liability reform. All of those are in that phase 3, which is something we want to work on all year. So that is in that category of issues. Hey, Stephanie.
Paul. Hey, good to see you, Paul.
Good to see you. How you doing?
Good.
Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Yes,
Now,
Mr.
we've
Speaker.
known each other for a long time. Stephanie used to be on our staff.
Okay. So Stephanie Kunder with DDC Public Affairs. I had a question regarding tax reform, given April 15th coming up, but specifically with the border adjustment tax. I know Governor Walker's opposed to it, Senator Johnson's opposed to it. I mean, in what way do you think it helps trade?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, it's tax policy. It's not trade policy. I don't know if people come out in total opposition. Once people kind of understand what this is, you see a lot of minds turning. So if you think of a border adjustment as a trade issue, then you would think that this is protectionist or mercantilist. It's not. It's really tax policy. It's a question of, do we want to have an income tax or a cash flow tax on businesses? If American businesses stick with an income tax, then we will never have a tax system that's better than the rest of the world. Right now, we have an income tax system on businesses that's the worst in the industrialized world. And it's one of the reasons why companies leave Wisconsin, leave America. It's one of the reasons why Johnson Controls, it made sense for them to become an Irish company. That was our largest publicly traded company in Wisconsin. Ireland has a 12.5% tax rate. We have a 35% tax rate. And we tax ourselves on a worldwide basis. No one else does that. So a border adjustment tax is a mechanism not to affect trade, but to get to a cash flow tax. Today, if it's produced in America, it's taxed. If it's not, it isn't effectively. We want to go to a destination-based tax where if it's consumed in America, it's taxed, and we don't care what you do overseas. So going to a cash flow tax, which requires a border adjustment, puts us in sync with the rest of the world, because 160 countries right now border adjust their taxes. It's America, North Korea, Afghanistan, Somalia, Sudan, Suriname, and a handful of other basket case countries that basically don't border adjust our taxes. So, let's take beer. Miller beer is brewed in Milwaukee. Heineken is brewed in Holland. When we brew a bottle of Miller Lite and we consume it in Milwaukee, it's taxed at our tax rates. When the beer is brewed in Holland and sent to America, it's untaxed. They border adjust. They take the tax off of it. We don't border adjust, so it's not taxed as it enters into. So American-made goods and services are at a disadvantage. They're taxed more than our foreign competitors. When we take a bottle of Miller and send it over to Holland, we tax it, and then as it enters Holland, it's taxed again to compete against their Heineken. So we are taxing ourselves more than our foreign competitors are, whether it's sold here or sold over there. So we've already put ourselves at a huge competitive disadvantage. So the question is, do we want to equalize this treatment so American-made goods and services are taxed the same way foreign-made goods and services are? That's all this is. So let's just make sure that if it's here, it's taxed the same. If it's over there, it's taxed the same, to level the playing field. And by leveling the playing field and going to a cash flow tax like that, we can actually lower our tax rates to like 20%. We can make sure that if you make money overseas, you can bring it back any darn day you want and with no strings attached. You can actually remove all tax incentives to move your profits, your manufacturing, or your headquarters overseas. This is the big problem we have in America. It makes sense in tax law to shift your manufacturing and your profits overseas. Right now, the American tax code tells the American producer, outsource your supply chain. Make your stuff overseas, then bring it back into America. We don't want to keep incentivizing that. We want it to make sense to make things in America, keep your company in America, keep your workers in America, and that's what this would achieve. So we think there's a lot of merit to this idea, and that is why we think tax reform, it could be a real winner for America if we leapfrog the rest of the world and get ourselves to one of the best tax codes we could ever have. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Since you put it in terms of beer, I understand it so much better. Okay.
That's why I say.
Mr. Speaker, I like your analogy about the frogs. I think if you run with the wheelbarrow, less will fall out.
Yeah, that's right.
Secondly, for the infrastructure plan, there's a lot of ways this thing can go. My guess is it's going to be 2/3 to 3/4 privately financed because of our deficit debt situation. Can you give us some more background on, one, how do you think it'd be financed, and two, what are we talking about? Is this broader than just roads and bridges and traditional infrastructure?
Yes, yes, and yes. So I think you're right. I think what we're trying to achieve here is to maximize the private sector footprint so we can have the maximum impact of infrastructure in the country. So what can we do with public dollars to leverage as many private dollars as possible to get as much infrastructure growth and development to occur. And yes, we believe in a broad base definition of infrastructure, because it's not just roads and bridges that are needed in this country. It's grid, it's harbors, it's pipelines, it's the entire energy system, it's many things. And so we see this as cutting across many lanes: air travel, water travel, land, truck, car travel, energy, all of those things. So it's really sort of all of the above in infrastructure. And what is it we can do through regulatory streamlining and through public sector dollars leveraging as many private sector dollars as possible to have the most maximum impact to get us toward a 21st century infrastructure system that is a good foundation for solid economic growth in the future.
Okay, back here.
So anyway, my name is Jerome Dances. So,
Who you with?
Mr. Speaker, you nicely.
Who are you with, Tyrone?
Who are you with?
University of Maryland.
Oh. Not a Wisconsinite. But you're in the Big Ten, so go ahead.
Well,
I'm just having
I
fun with you.
graduated from the University of Wisconsin, but that's, sorry. You nicely described how the tax code greatly disadvantages American companies and the absurdities of it. Well, what is the background? How did it come about that we have a system which is counterproductive to ourselves?
I hear you, and I'm thinking of a great economist that I really enjoyed over at Maryland was Mansur Olson. Wrote some phenomenal books. We're sort of living in The Rise and Decline of Nations, a book he wrote, which is guilds and special interest groups imperializing democracies and making it harder through crony capitalism and the rest for us to do the real kinds of reforms we need. So the work that Mansur did, I never met the man, I just read his books, that he did is a perfect challenge for us today as the world's oldest democracy, and can we, republic really, and can we get through this? I think what happened was we have always had an income tax, and our business taxation is an income tax system, and it's taxed based on origin. It's taxed based on what originates in America, what is produced in America, and the rest of the world went with different systems. And you can go back to sort of the mid-1980s. 31 years ago, the year I got my driver's license, we did income tax reform that Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp and Bill Bradley and others did, which tripped off, in a good way, a sense of tax reform around the world. 86 tax reform arguably put America in the lead with the rest of the world for a more competitive tax system. Well, the rest of the world responded, and they all have much more competitive tax systems. On top of that, the rest of the world, in the industrialized world, have two kinds of tax systems on their businesses: an income tax system and a consumption tax system. And what's been happening over the last number of years is economists and governments have widely determined income taxes on businesses are really anti-competitive. They're not good. They discourage domestic production. They encourage money to go overseas. And so governments, not ours, have been lowering their income taxes to be more competitive, to attract businesses, and increasing their consumption taxes to make up for the revenue loss. Those are border-adjusted consumption taxes. 160 countries today border-adjust their consumption taxes. And so what we're suggesting is, instead of having this clunky income tax system that is increasingly less and less competitive with the other countries, let's convert our system to a cash flow tax, which is a form of a consumption tax that border adjusts like everybody else, but ours would be far more competitive than everybody else in the world, because they would still have a consumption tax and an income tax, and we would have a leaner, better consumption tax system that rewards making things in America, that stops penalizing keeping money and production in America. And we believe that doing this would leapfrog us, like we did in 1986, to the front of the pack to have the most economically competitive and efficient tax system in the industrialized world, which we believe will attract investment to America, give us faster economic growth, increase jobs, increase wages, increase productivity, increase living standards, which is what we're all trying to do. And so I think that's kind of where this is. We're good, we're bad, we're on the business end of international competition, and we want to get back in the game of having a better system than everybody else.
All right, we're running out of time here, so just a couple more questions. Go ahead. I have to hold the mic.
Okay. Ed Cohen. I'm with Honda, which does not have a plant in Wisconsin, but we do have a boatload of suppliers in Wisconsin.
There's a plant in Janesville that can.
Yeah, we've got
you could
4
take
million
over.
square feet for you if you want it.
And 8
take you on a
family
tour.
members went to Wisconsin. I wanted to ask you a question about NAFTA. Companies like ours have global supply systems. What do you want to do to NAFTA, if anything? Do you want to tweak it? Do you want to repeal it? Does it need to be changed? What needs to be done
I
with
think
NAFTA?
it needs to be upgraded and updated for the 21st century. TPP negotiations, which are gone, and that was effectively a renegotiation of NAFTA to begin with. Because when we went into those issues, when we did NAFTA, the internet didn't exist. You know, all these data and cross-border data flow issues didn't exist. We have other issues like energy. We now, since NAFTA, have learned that North America is a huge global deposit of energy, you know, between Mexico, Canada, and North America, and America. So we need to upgrade NAFTA to reflect the 21st century, to reflect some new opportunities we have. I would love to see a North American energy play for the rest of the world. We could put OPEC, you know, really give them a run for their money. And also, we have to upgrade the trade agreement to reflect just the new 21st century challenges that we have that didn't exist when that was done. And I think that kind of reflects where the administration is. They want to upgrade NAFTA so that it works for everybody and make it jive with the realities of the 21st century, which it's an old 1993 agreement. We need to upgrade it.
Okay, I'm going to honor the commitment, and we're going to end it real soon on this last
Wendy.
question. So make it a good one, Wendy.
Hey, Wendy, how you doing?
No pressure.
No pressure. Thanks for being here, Mr. Speaker. And thank you. If no one has said it lately, thank you for putting some of your personal goals to the side to take on this role. I know it wasn't your first choice, but we clearly need you in this role. My question, we've done so much policy, so I'm just going to go for it. What books have you read lately that you recommend?
Oh, what books have I read lately that I recommend? You know, I really enjoyed this book about James Garfield, who actually was killed. But that was probably one of my more interesting books about the Garfield presidency. I grew up on Garfield Street in Janesville. I always kind of wanted, you know, what was the story of James Garfield? There's a book out that's pretty recent about James Garfield that I really liked. I think J.D. Vance's book, I just finished that a little while ago, Hillbilly Elegy. I think that's a good read for everybody. I think Hillbilly Elegy is a really well-written story about a young man who made it out of a real tough background, and it does a good job of describing the kind of odds people growing up in poor communities are striving against, especially in rural Appalachia. He was from Middletown, Ohio, a town I know pretty well from college. And I think J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, of all the recent books I read, is probably one of the more ones that sticks in the front of my mind.
Okay, closing statement.
Don't have a closing statement.
That's
Hey,
it.
Go Badgers, go Packers.
Oh,
How's that?
keep it light.
Keep it simple. All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks,
man. Yeah, good
Speaker
seeing you,
Paul
Jeff. You
Ryan.
bet.
Thanks
Nice to
very
see you.
much. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Or this way?
Okay, please stay seated. Again, I want to thank our sponsors and partners.